In this class we want to talk about the evaluation of market segments and the targeting strategies that may be deployed in order to maximize the benefits from these segments. So first of all, it's necessary to evaluate and identify the market segments and then to select the segment that is most appropriate and target that segment. Within any market there may be various segments identified, but it doesn't mean that all of them are that good. Some of them may be better than others. So it's a question of identifying the best one, the one that meets the objectives of the business. So it's identifying the segments and then targeting the segments. And this whole process of selecting and targeting will give the marketers a clear indication of the segment's attractiveness. There'll be some sort of evaluation of the various segments so as to select the best one. Now, the segments in the market rely on various factors. For example, the size of the segment. Well, it must be a realistic size to provide economic benefits. Selecting a very small segment may not be viable. The sales or the demand within the segment may be too small. Obviously it depends on the nature of the product being sold. If you're selling battleships, then perhaps selling one battleship will be enough, so the market may be somewhat restricted. But I think in the case we're trying to consider here, we're talking about general business and perhaps much smaller scale than selling battleships. So the size of the market is important. It has to have economic business, and there must be a reasonable amount of customers for a segment to be effective. Reasonable amount, very vague term. What it means is that there must be sufficient customers with sufficient income, disposable income, to enable the segment to be effective as a segment. And also we should look at the rate of growth of the segment. And this means identifying customers' demands and trying to satisfy those demands. What are the customers' needs, and then trying to satisfy the needs. But looking at current trends, current patterns to forecast future demands is always risky, but it's also probably the only tool that is available. I mean, trying to predict the future is extremely difficult. In the words of one very famous Austrian economist, Friedrich von Hayek, the future is unknowable. We can't know the future. There are too many variables and too many things may happen. But we have to work with what we've got, and we may have some historic data in a segment or relating to a particular segment, so it may be possible to try and, I think the Americans have a term called guesstimate. We estimate and we guess. We guesstimate the future. And planning for future growth prospects. This enables the business to restructure itself. It enables managers, middle managers, senior management, the CEO. It enables everyone to gear up to perhaps what is likely to happen in the future. So there is a planning process that's needed. There's also an element of competition within the segments. So the attractiveness of a segment may also depend on who's already there, what competition exists in that segment. Obviously, the greater the level of competition, the smaller the profitability, because it's a competitive market. Um, It's also be the case that competition may arise from new entrants, new companies coming in, and this also can trigger competitive rivalry. To stop new entrants, there may be barriers to entry. These are dealt with in a separate video, but for the moment, a barrier to entry could be something like a legal blockage on competition, legal blockage in the form of a patent or a patent. Depends on how you pronounce it. It could be also that it's very expensive to set up in this business, or it could be that raw materials are difficult to find or to purchase, or so there are various ways of stopping companies from coming in. Now, companies may know that the segment is highly profitable, but they can't get in. That, of course, enables the companies who are already in to exercise some degree of monopoly power, power due to their position, their privileged position. And should it become a competitive environment, how does the company overcome this? How does the company develop its competition strategy? How does it outmaneuver the others in the market? Big questions. Okay, the next one to look at the attractiveness of market segment is to look at sales potential and profitability. Quite simply, is the segment profitable? I mean, it's a basic question. There's no point in targeting a segment if it's not profitable. Is the organization meeting current demands currently? So in other words, is it necessary even to look into developing a separate segment? Perhaps the existing market has still got potential. So maybe it's better to deal with what you've got than to try something new. And larger segments are not always that profitable, again because of competition. And we've talked about this just a few moments ago. But larger segments will attract more competition, more producers. Of course, smaller segments will have less competition, but of course also less potential because they're smaller. It's a trade-off. Larger or smaller. Larger, perhaps more profitable, but more competition. Riskier. Smaller, less competition, but also perhaps less profits. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Does the market segment complement the company's strategies, its achievements and its ambitions? Does the market segment complement this? Well, let's say it does. Let's say if yes, then we can pose a series of questions. We can say, how can the company offer value to the customer in that segment? So it's going into the segment. How can it actually offer value to the customer? How does it do this? How does it identify the customer's needs and solve those needs? How can it do that with the product? Does it need to amend the product? Does it need to have a variant of the product? What variable in the 4 Ps will it reach for? Does it need to sell it cheaper in that segment? Is the company suitable in the segment? Maybe some companies don't suit particular segments. Perhaps they're more generalist. Depends on the aspirations, but perhaps instead of targeting a particular segment, they might want to remain general. It depends on the nature of the product, of course, but they might want to remain more generalist, apply to every segment of the market. But it depends on the product. If the product is a cosmetic, then chances are it'll be targeted at females, so there's a segmentation on the basis of gender. But it depends. Can it afford to get into the segment? It's easy to target a segment perhaps if all the information points in that direction and everyone thinks it's a good idea, but it does take resources to get in. Extra sales staff, extra promotion expenditure, the promotions budget would have to be increased. Getting into the segment is not free. It is expensive, and the company would need to know it's got the resources to do it. If you finally agree to go in or decide to go in to a particular segment, is it sufficiently profitable to meet the aspirations of the business? Does it feed it back into the growth strategy of the business or the survival tactics of the business? Or is it profitable, but there are many costs and complexities involved in running and managing the segment? Perhaps in some respects the profitability is outweighed by the headache caused in the expansion. So that's a perspective of market segments and what's needed to get in and what considerations must be borne in mind before a decision is made to enter a segment or target the segment or not. And that also concludes our class. So thank you for watching.